Pixar's Soul releases today. I know you might think that this is a 2020 movie and it came out more so like December 25th on Disney Plus or something, but no! Finally, Pixar is doing theatrical releases of both Soul and Turning Red, and also Luca. So I thought with today being a day that it's out actually in cinemas and properly giving Pixar the limelight it deserves, I thought I would revisit for a little bit of a review. I have an interesting relationship with Pixar's Soul. I mean, it was actually one of the very first times I went to a new scale of viral on a video I was making. This was practically the movie that I started the trending trailers playlist with and then abandoned for 3 years for some reason. See, I came out with a video that said, why Pixar's Soul concerns me. Great big piece of clickbait, got a lot of people very upset. I find people very comfortably click on a Pixar thumbnail, and even more so when it's negative. And to be fair, I was legitimately a little bit concerned. It wasn't just clickbait. The concept of Pixar's Soul was one that I was a little bit dicey on in comparison, you know? You could tell that I tried to do something. I made 2 more videos out of it, and they all said conflicted at the top, right? Nothing else. Because you see, I personally was getting very tired of the trope of watching a Pixar character that was just a sort of vague shape, you know? When you have Pixar able to push the boundaries of realism and photorealistic textures and quality, and you see this amazing outsourcing presentation of New York and all this brilliant visuals, and then we flop to this grey zone with tints of blue and a vaguely cyan, I guess there's some sort of color light fraction going on with their bodies, but generally boring looking characters. I just like not as interested as I wanted to be. And though I was certain it was going to do something about crying over the philosophies of life and death, and that's a very harsh topic that'd be interesting to see, I was also admittedly concerned that it was all about an African-American character who immediately stops looking African-American, put into the body of some blob, you know? Of course, once the movie actually came out and I got to watch it on my tiny television screen in 2020, thankfully that was not the case. There is all sorts of scenes of photorealism, you see all the different elements of New York, and though technically our main character isn't actually playing as our main character, a lot of my pretty awkward concerns were quite comfortably ironed out. However, I never really liked this movie quite as much as I think the general public did. I'm pretty scared of people's opinions, especially of me. I'm just a naturally awkward and shy and introverted person who for some reason decided to make a career out of talking out loud to people. Very big mistake I've made there. But I do pride myself on sometimes going against the public grain if I truly believe it. I'm happy to say that I dislike a movie that is beloved if I do genuinely feel that way. I don't want to be the kind of reviewer that just follows the trends and says, this is good movie because everyone says it's good, you know? So I thought I would revisit this movie and look at it again with a new lens. I had a lot of expectations for this movie, I think because I had so many complaints. So, revisiting it 3 years later, do I have the same complications? Well, here's the thing, right? Since this movie's come out, Pixar seems to be going only more downhill. Turning Red was a massive flop, Lightyear theatrical was still a massive flop, and Luca's always been decent but in the middle. I think Luca and Pixar's Soul have a weird sort of middle ground. They're kind of mid-movies. They're not Pixar classics in the way that Monsters Inc. or Cars 1 are, but it's also not emblematic of the super flop that everyone dogs onto Pixar these days. So looking back at a movie like this that isn't as bad as its most recent, maybe puts it in a slightly better light than it is before. Of course, even then, when it comes to Pixar classics, a lot of the reasons that they are so well beloved is that element of nostalgia. None of us are necessarily immune to nostalgia, and I bloody love the damn thing. I still get tingles that go down my spine when I listen to songs like When Somebody Loved Me from Toy Story 2, or just listening to the soundtracks in general. Some bits just really scratch a sort of dopamine receptor in my brain somewhere. So obviously, a movie like Soul with its new soundtrack isn't going to have that same effect. That being said, one of the initial complaints I did actually have about this movie was the soundtrack. Now hear me out. I'm not talking about the loud and proud jazz right up front and center. Jazz is clearly a central part of this movie, and that does sound incredible. But this movie is 2 halves, right? There are 2 literal dimensions in this movie, and I didn't like the sound of the ghost dimension, the afterlife, the before, blobby world. So let's listen to it again. One of the more notable ones is the theme to the character of Terry. And like, it's memorable. It's a very measured rhythm, simultaneously a very spiritual kind of sound with a very methodical intention. And this, I think, was the exact sound I was hearing when there's a moment of 22 running away. It's not action sounds, and it's vague because the concept is vague, but I don't know how well that translates onto the screen. Whilst at the same time, during, say, the highlights like Epiphany, there's this beautiful mixing between the spiritual synth of this soul world and the real-life piano that our protagonist is playing. This works great. It's simple, it's quiet, it feels like it hits along one of those sad, rainy playlists you can find on YouTube that are like an hour long or more. When the movie wants to tell a point, when it wants to hit a climactic moment, it's great. There's these incredible moments, and though I don't have the nostalgia for it, I wouldn't be surprised if someone in the future will, looking back on this. I don't think the melody's necessarily strong enough entirely to make that moment happen, but it's not meant to be a big nostalgic boost of, oh, this is the Monsters, Inc. theme, you know? But so many of the other elements of this movie are clearly not the highlighting scenes. They're not the big moments, and the soundtrack behind them, I feel, doesn't quite work. It might match, but it doesn't work. And that might be a very strange claim, as after all, this movie did actually win an Oscar for original score, but I still think I just disagree. When Joe first arrives in the spiritual realm and is looking at the great before, it works in a way that it reminds me of the WALL-E soundtrack. The bleeps and the bloops work for this magical, technical world, but all the other spiritual scenes feel like they're stunted from an audio perspective because it just sounds too calm. It's like the video has been repurposed by someone else and they've added an unusual and unfitting song. I get that it's thematically on point. However, on the other side of the movie, you do of course have the main IRL adventure that the two go on. And for so much of this, the soundtrack and the score works so brilliantly for it, yes. All of the different jazzy elements coming together and all the ways it's used with the different sequences down in the subway and out on the street. This is actually a real gift to the ears that I don't think I properly recognized the first time through. I was too busy thinking, where the bloody hell is this story going, that I wasn't thinking and, ironically enough, stopping in the moment. Which is what this film is all about, enjoying the moments in the present. And I guess that does stitch it better to the score and why it's attached. With the movie being about slowing down, taking things calm and enjoying the small things in life, maybe a soundtrack that isn't so interactive and is more just placated in the background fits. I still don't really like it, but I think I dislike it a little bit less, and I certainly love the jazz a whole lot more, because I just completely ignored that fact. This soundtrack by no means is iconic to me, it's certainly not nostalgic, and I'm not going to listen to it on the side, really, unless I'm trying to go to bed and I've run out of polyrhythms to listen to. But this movie doesn't really sound as bad as I initially thought. Or at the very least, I can understand where other people enjoy it to a degree that maybe I do not. So let's talk about the characters for a minute, shall we? Because I didn't necessarily have a major hook with the characters either. Maybe that makes sense, I am neither of these two protagonists, but even then, Pixar movies are often filled with these iconically memorable characters in all sorts of ways. Here we have mopingly sad main man and whiny teenager blob character. You've then got the hippie guy that's there for pretty minimal screen time, flipping around signs and then hosting a ship. There are others inside of his little cult, but they are almost unknown. And then you do have the relatives and people around Joe Gardner in his life, who again have moments and scenes, but they don't have memories attached to them. In fact, we do have some memories with Joe Gardner, but they're memories we don't necessarily see. In fact, the character I know best other than Joe Gardner really is Joe Gardner's father, who isn't even around, really. And then you've got the element of the villains. Now, these are actually some really interesting concepts. The character designs and the ideas behind this movie are undoubtedly inventive, but I'm not enthralled by anybody here. I think it doesn't help that one of the main characters talking the whole time is the character of Jerry, who just sounds like Richard Ayoade the whole time, because he is just playing himself. And I can't unhear its, oh, relevant British comedian here. But then you've also got the actual villain of the story, Terry. Thank you for making it halfway through this video. You know, there are 2 more Pixar movies coming out to the cinema screens. We're gonna do reviews on them when they come out as well, so subscribe if you haven't already, if you'd like to see those. Or if you like movie reviews in general, I'll be covering every animated one coming out this year as well, so come join us for that. But otherwise, let's get back to the retrospective underdog climb up of this movie's rankings in my eyes. 3 years on. Back to the video. Terry. She is essentially death. She's the Grim Reaper, she's an accountant worried that the numbers are wrong, chasing the characters the entire time through the movie to do their thing. It's, you know, standard, it's fun, she interacts with the world weird, it's an interesting concept. It's still not a character that sticks for me, you know? I'm not necessarily scared of her, I'm not rooting for her, I don't really know her. She's not given a lot of screen time, and she doesn't do a lot with her screen time. Now, oftentimes, when it comes to Pixar villains, maybe the thing you remember the most is their final moments. In the climax of the movie, though, in this one, I practically forgot what she did, and it's because she doesn't do much. She gets knotted up at the end. She stands in the way of 22 when they're in their beast depressive form, and they get tied up into a knot and left to the side. Their whole arc and story following the characters this entire time become irrelevant, nonsensical, unimpactful, in a way that I guess the movie wants you to focus on the unimpactful moments more. It's again one of those things where I don't know if I'm just really strongly biased, but even watching this movie again, I'm just not hooked. I love the idea of this movie if it was a cancelled production, being like, wow, they're talking about the afterlife and the before, and there's these different dimensions and these cool 2D characters in a 3D movie. Gosh, I love if someone was able to mix up 2D and 3D. But actually seeing it executed, there's a lot of elements that just feel not flat, but soft, I guess would be the best way to explain it. Like the edges to all of our characters, there's just not enough edge to it. But I don't want them to be edgy, you know what I mean. Still, despite the fact that there are actors just playing with their normal voice because they're meant to be the celebrity recognized point, I do actually like the voice acting in a lot of this movie. I don't think I ever really do mention the quality of the actors in movies because generally, if they're on the screen at this point, they're pretty damn good. They just merge into their characters. That's all great and brilliant. I don't think I'm ever really going to say anyone's done a particularly bad job, especially in a Pixar movie. I'm sure the comedian was directed to just use his normal voice, you know? It's just how it is. And the fact that the story does just sort of wind on, that the main character becomes an animal the whole movie and is just following in a body that's not his, following someone who is in his body, is like not the plot line that I initially wanted. I'm a lot more accepting of it this time, and it does go into some interesting directions, you know? It's an interesting perspective on the world and on life, and it, you know, works for the story that they're trying to tell. So fine. I like the story a lot more because I've come to accept it. And I can see how it does resonate people because this is a deeply philosophical movie. Talking about a theme as serious as dealing with death is an incredible prompt for Pixar, and according to the people, they've nailed it. One of the other initial complaints I had for this movie was the actual message and the theming, the philosophy behind this movie, because it was just, hey, you want life to be more satisfying? Enjoy the little things, which I always thought was the most generic, obvious, ideal one point of advice on philosophy. In a world that is so creative, with so many interesting character designs and developments and interactions, for this movie to be so inventive and pushing the boundary of a thought process, for it to come to, hey, let's go with the most basic philosophy of how to handle life, I certainly was unimpressed the first time. However, the more I thought about that stance, the more I can't really come to a second idea either. I've thought about this opinion of mine for a long time, and I can never really think of what message I would have wanted for this movie to have to enjoy life more or to get something more satisfying. And in fact, I've even embraced that kind of philosophy in my real life without even thinking about it. I made like a New Year's resolution starting December 1st, because I'm weird like that, of just trying to live in the present a lot more. Oftentimes I will say to myself in as many days as I can, what can I do to make this day better? Admittedly, it's led to me eating a whole lot more Subway sandwiches, but I'm enjoying my life a whole lot more, and it allows me to have a more satisfying life alongside my work-life balance and trying to do hobbies and everything at once. I personally have been trying to open up more time for myself to do things like hobbies or just do nothing, against my usual lifestyle of working 14 hours a day and running at the wall, you know? So perhaps with the message being to stop and smell the roses couldn't really be any better despite my complaints, because it tells that message in a really great way. So even if I don't like the message, the execution on it is pretty damn good. Sitting down with the piano and hearing this beautiful melody as he comes to this realization, being told about it with all the little items that 22 receives on her day out in his body, this movie is going for a deeply spiritual vibe. And though that doesn't necessarily always mean edge and action, it nails what it is actually going for, even if it's not what I wanted. However, if there is still one thing on the execution I have to complain about, it is a little bit of that pacing. The pacing is a little bit strange in this movie. You begin with a 10-minute sequence of Joe Gardner in his real life, dissatisfied but also trying to strive up, and it all falling apart at his hands, right? Then, for the next 25 minutes, we're in the spiritual realm, learning all about what there is and how the world works. Fine, good, standard. Then, at the 40-minute mark, we then have the whole big day in someone else's body, experiencing the world and actually seeing a new perspective on life, until the 1 hour and 10 mark. We get 20 minutes in the realm, 30 minutes out of the realm, and then we're back in the realm again, very, very briefly, to then go in the real world for the final night, where we come to the revelation 1 hour and 20 minutes in, and then it's a big spiritual sprint to the finish before the finale at 1 minute 30. The fact that this movie is only 90 minutes usually makes me think a movie's a little undercooked, but it definitely feels like it by the third act, whereby the characters are ripped out of their bodies in the afterlife. They're put back into the positions they wanted from the start of the movie, and then 10 minutes later we come to the proper revelation. The issue comes from the fact that the proper revelation takes place 8 minutes before the finale, and then this final sequence is just kind of a big speed rush, where now suddenly 22 has gone rabid. Now there's a ship that needs to chase after it. Now she becomes a gigantic thing, and we go inside of her body to see all of her self-doubts. And then we come out again, and there's the whole goodbyes, and I'm scared, and then she goes to Earth, and then the guy has to go through his final conveyor and deal with his death, whether he chooses to take it or not, and then he doesn't take it in the end anyway. And it's a lot all condensed into the final 8 minutes, and it's a shame, because being a movie all about taking things slow and enjoying the moment in the moment, it sure does like to press the fast forward button the moment we're into single digits left of the movie. Plus, it's still kind of strange to me that there's this whole element of he's dead and oh god, he doesn't want to hit the white light at the end of the conveyor, and then at the end he doesn't get to the white end at the end of the conveyor. It feels like it would have been far more impactful if he did actually go that way. Incredibly dark, I guess. Maybe I'm too British for this, but it feels weird that he does still manage to skirt the big problem, because the philosophy around life and death really in the real world is death is inevitably coming. And the fact that it addresses that by dodging it for a little bit longer still feels a little bit odd. So overall, there's all sorts of highs and lows I have when imagining my review ranking details for this movie. A lot of notches have been moved up, and a handful of notches have been moved down. I think at the end of the day, with 3 years of experience put on top of this movie, it is still not nostalgic, you know? It is still not a Pixar classic. This movie has, like, a very well-acclaimed percept from the public. Like, it's got like 96 on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that that's the best notifier of quality, but still. And I think I can come to respect this movie a whole lot more accepting it for what it is. But there are still those little elements that I think really bring it down a tier, away from Pixar Classic and over to Pixar Mid. But now, I think it's a high mid, you know? It's not as good as Cars 1, but it's not as bad as Cars 2. And considering all the other flops we've had it in more recent years, this movie looked to be all the more better. If not for anything, that it has a message that strikes at the heart. I know they said that Pixar movies are meant to make you cry, and recently they kind of haven't. I kind of like when they do, to be honest. I think a Pixar movie that makes you cry is a damn quality, iconic Pixar movie. And though perhaps for some Turning Red can do that, and Luca maybe could, and Lightyear might only in the first 20 minutes, I think Soul is potentially one of the latest bastions of a true, actual, kind of cry moment, or a sit back and let the tears well in your eyes kind of moment. And for that, that certainly gives it some sort of accolade as a Pixar great, but not a Pixar greatest. Am I glad this movie is finally getting its spotlight in the limelight with a full theatrical release? Absolutely. I'll be curious to see if it actually does well, since this movie's still available on Disney Plus for free. So maybe it's gonna flop a second time. But hey, it's not about the high highs and the expectations you have in your life. It's about enjoying the moment in the moment. Enjoying the fact that the movie's on the big screen in the first place, regardless of how many people are there to watch it. For now though, I'm gonna end it off here. That was a lovely, rambly, little bit late review, looking back on Pixar's Soul. But please do share your opinions of the very same movie if you haven't already. I imagine it'll be a lot more positive than mine, although if you do have complaints, I'd also be curious to hear that as well. I've heard a lot more positive than negative, so maybe it'd be unique to hear some negatives, but you know, keep it realistic. For now though, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a little bit.